The galaxy had been quiet for centuries. Stars burned in their usual places, fleets patrolled the same old trade routes, and the Empire ruled with confidence that nothing could ever challenge its power again. Every planet in its reach obeyed. Every colony carried its flag. To the billions who lived under its rule, the Empire seemed eternal, unchanging, unbreakable, unstoppable. But deep inside the walls of the imperial capital, where the Grand Council met each morning under a ceiling of crystal and light, there was a secret. It wasn't something people spoke of out loud, not even in the private chambers of generals or scholars. It was something buried in forbidden archives, an old legend that the younger officers laughed at but the older ones never quite forgot. They called it the Lost Earth. Long before the Empire had risen, it was said that humans had once lived on a single world, a world filled with oceans, clouds, and forests, a place where people built machines that could fly between stars before most of the galaxy even knew what flight was. But then one day Earth disappeared from every known map. Some said it destroyed itself. Others said its people had left, traveling beyond the edge of the galaxy to escape a great war. No one truly knew what happened, and over time the story faded into myth. The Empire had long considered itself the highest form of civilization. It had spread across the stars, uniting hundreds of worlds under its command. But deep down, some of the older admirals feared the day that old myth might become real again. They feared that one day, the people of the forgotten Earth might return, and that they wouldn't come back as friends. It started on a quiet night shift at one of the Empire's outer observation posts. The station orbited a cold, silent moon that circled a dying star. Most of the crew were half asleep, watching their sensors blink in dull rhythm. Suddenly, one of the operators noticed something strange, an energy surge unlike anything recorded before. It came from beyond mapped space, from an area the Empire never explored because nothing ever came from there. At first, they thought it was a malfunction. But the signal grew stronger. It wasn't just random noise, it had a pattern like a heartbeat. The operator ran the signal through every translation system they had, but it didn't match any known species or code. It was ancient yet incredibly advanced. When the report reached the Imperial Command Center, nobody laughed. The High Council immediately ordered the region placed under quiet observation. No public announcement. No official notice. They wanted to keep this secret until they understood what they were dealing with. Days later, the signal became something much more. The telescopes at the outer colonies picked up movement, something large and slow, drifting through space like a shadow against the stars. It wasn't a fleet. It wasn't even a group of ships. It was one vessel. But its size defied belief. The first images that came back left everyone speechless. The ship was old, at least it looked old, but its design was beyond anything the Empire had ever seen. Thick metal plating ran across its hull, and its surface carried strange markings. Some looked like letters from an ancient human language no one had used for thousands of years. And across its front hull, clearly visible even through static and distance, were two words, UES Dreadnought. The name sent shivers down the spine of every historian who saw it. There were no records of such a ship in the Empire's archives. Nothing in the ancient relics, nothing in lost databases, nothing even in myths. And yet the prefix UES, United Earthship, was unmistakable. It meant only one thing. The legends were real. Earth had existed. And now one of its ships was here. The Dreadnought didn't behave like a normal vessel. It didn't send out any message. It didn't respond to hails. It just moved slowly and silently, its engines glowing faintly, following a steady path straight toward the center of Imperial space. Every time a patrol tried to approach, something went wrong. Ships lost communication, or their systems shut down completely as if the Dreadnought had simply whispered to them through the vacuum of space and turned their power off. No explosions, no attacks, just silence. The few crews who managed to return described a strange feeling when they got close to it. They said the ship didn't feel like a machine. It felt alive, as if it was watching them. Inside the Imperial Palace, panic began to grow, though no one admitted it openly. The Emperor's advisors held endless meetings, trying to decide whether to send a full fleet or to wait. One faction believed the Dreadnought was just a ghost ship, an ancient derelict pulled by unknown forces. Another faction thought it was a weapon, sent by something older and greater than the Empire. Days turned into weeks, and the Dreadnought kept moving closer. The Empire's best scientists tried to analyze its energy output, but their readings made no sense. Its power levels were impossible by any known standard. It carried the energy of a small star, yet emitted almost no heat. It was like the laws of physics bent around it. Some of the lower-ranked officers began whispering about prophecies, about the old human world that vanished and might now be returning to claim what was once theirs. Others dismissed it all as superstition. But when the Third Fleet disappeared, 40 ships gone without a trace, nobody laughed anymore. In the quiet halls of the Imperial Academy, a historian named Orion, one of the few scholars who still studied ancient human myths, was summoned to speak before the council. He was old and tired, but when they showed him the images of the Dreadnought, his eyes widened. He recognized the symbols immediately. He told them that long before the Empire's birth, humans had built ships capable of traveling not just across galaxies, but through time itself. These vessels were said to hold the collective memory of their people, containing entire civilizations within them. They were never meant for war but for survival. And if one had returned now, it meant something was coming. Something big enough to awaken a power that had slept for thousands of years. The council dismissed him at first, but his words stayed with them. Especially when he pointed out one simple fact. If they wanted to destroy you, you would already be gone. Outside, as the Dreadnought entered the outer border of the Empire's core region, entire populations gathered near viewing towers and night domes, staring up at the strange light that now moved across their skies. For the first time in living memory, the Empire's citizens felt something they hadn't felt in centuries: fear. Yet, mixed with that fear was something else: curiosity, hope, a sense that maybe the stories of Earth were not myths after all. Maybe there was more to their history than what the Empire had allowed them to know. The Dreadnought kept its silence. Its engines hummed softly like a heartbeat across the stars. Whenever small ships tried to scan it, their data came back scrambled. Some said the ship was shielding its secrets. Others thought it was simply too old for their systems to understand. But a few believed the Dreadnought was testing them, watching to see if they would act with fear or with wisdom. One night, after weeks of silence, the Dreadnought finally sent a transmission. It wasn't long, just a brief pulse of sound repeated over and over again. It took the Empire's best linguists hours to decode it. When they finally translated it, the room fell silent. It said, "We have returned to find what was lost, that was all." No threat, no demand, just that. But those few words changed everything. The Emperor ordered a communication be sent back offering peaceful contact. But there was no reply. The Dreadnought kept moving, slowly, patiently, toward the Imperial capital. Behind closed doors, the Empire began preparing for war, though no one dared say it out loud. Massive fleets were gathered, weapon systems charged, soldiers drilled. Yet deep down everyone knew, if this ship truly came from Earth, then the Empire's weapons might not be enough. Across the galaxy, rumors spread. Some said the Dreadnought carried the last survivors of an ancient human race. Others said it was unmanned, guided by an old intelligence. But those who had seen it up close swore they felt something, an unseen presence that reached through their thoughts and made them remember forgotten feelings. Home, warmth, peace. Whatever the truth was, one thing became certain. The Empire's greatest fear had returned. Not an enemy, not a warlord, but something far older, something that reminded them that their rule over the stars might not last forever. And somewhere deep inside the heart of the Dreadnought, behind layers of metal and time, something stirred, something waiting for the right moment to speak. End of Part 1, 1,500 words approx. Simple, emotional, cinematic, and YouTube-friendly. When the giant ship entered the outer borders of the Empire, people across nearby worlds began to see strange lights in the night sky. Some thought it was a comet. Others believed it was a new kind of star. But soon the news spread from one colony to another. It wasn't a star at all. It was a ship, and it was moving straight toward the center of the Empire. The first official sighting came from a mining station floating above a gas planet. The workers there were used to seeing Imperial cruisers passing by, but what appeared that day was something beyond imagination. It filled the entire sky. Even from far away, they could see the smooth metal skin of the ship, the massive hull covered with markings that looked too old to understand. It was like staring at a piece of history that had suddenly come alive. The Imperial Command sent patrols to observe it from a safe distance. The patrol ships circled the giant slowly, scanning it from every angle, but the readings made no sense. The Dreadnought's surface was cold, yet it gave off a power signature stronger than any known reactor. Its movements were slow, graceful, and steady, almost like it was alive and breathing. The captain of one patrol said later that being near it felt like standing beside a sleeping giant. You could sense its power even though it wasn't moving much. The ship wasn't just built. It was crafted with precision no modern technology could match. When the report reached the Imperial Palace, the council gathered again in their secret chamber. Holograms of the Dreadnought filled the room. The older members stared quietly while the younger ones whispered, unsure what to think. The Emperor himself remained silent for a long time before speaking. "If this is what I believe it is," he said, "then history is about to change." No one dared to disagree. Across the Empire, the story spread like a storm. People whispered in marketplaces, in factories, in schools. Some were afraid, others were excited. For generations they had heard old stories about the lost world of humans, the world called Earth. But no one ever expected its people, or even its machines, to return. Meanwhile, the Dreadnought continued its quiet journey. It didn't stop for anyone. Whenever Imperial fleets tried to approach, something strange happened. Their systems began to fail. First communications, then engines, then lights. Everything simply went dark. No explosions, no noise, just darkness. After a few minutes, power would return. But the Dreadnought would already be gone, moving farther ahead like nothing had happened. Scientists at the Imperial Academy tried to understand how this was possible. They studied recordings, energy readings, and magnetic scans, but everything defied explanation. It was as if the ship carried a technology so far beyond their reach that even their machines couldn't comprehend it. One scientist quietly said, "It's like trying to read a book written by the universe itself." Soon, entire news networks across the galaxy began showing footage of the ship. Even though the Empire tried to censor most of it, some recordings leaked. People saw the giant vessel floating silently, its metallic surface glowing with faint blue lines as if light was running through its veins. For the first time in centuries, the people of the Empire felt something new, wonder. But the military saw something else: danger. The Emperor ordered a massive fleet to prepare for possible contact. The goal was not to attack, but to observe and protect. Hundreds of ships took position along the Dreadnought's projected path. They were told to maintain a safe distance and record everything. It was meant to show strength, to remind anyone watching that the Empire still ruled the stars. As the Dreadnought approached the outer defense line, every ship held its breath. They sent dozens of messages, greetings in different languages, signals of peace, signals of warning. Nothing came back. The Dreadnought simply glided past them, silent and steady. The closer it came to the core worlds, the more restless the Empire became. The Council began to argue. Some said the ship might be carrying survivors or explorers from a forgotten human colony. Others feared it was a warning or the beginning of something larger. No one could prove anything. At the same time, small signs began appearing across the galaxy. Ancient human artifacts, once buried in museums or ruins, started to react. Old machines that hadn't worked for centuries suddenly came to life, glowing with the same faint blue light that ran across the Dreadnought's hull. It was as if the ship was awakening something dormant across space, a silent connection between what was and what is. One young technician, working in a remote observatory, was the first to notice a strange transmission repeating on an old frequency. The signal wasn't random. It carried a rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. When she decoded it using ancient language patterns, she realized it wasn't just a signal. It was a message. It said only one thing: "Do not fear. We seek what was lost." She sent the message to her superiors, but it was quickly classified as top secret. Only a few people within the highest levels of command were allowed to see it. Still, whispers escaped. Soon, millions across the Empire began repeating those same words: "We seek what was lost." Some said it was a warning. Others said it was hope. Days passed. The Dreadnought slowed near a quiet system known as Valar, a region filled with uninhabited planets and empty stations. The Empire sent a small team of researchers there, hoping to finally make contact. They positioned observation drones around the Dreadnought, keeping a safe distance. At first, everything was calm. The Dreadnought floated silently, its engines barely glowing. Then, without warning, one of the drones sent back a visual feed from inside the ship. No one could understand how it had entered. The Dreadnought hadn't opened any doors. But for a few brief seconds, the camera showed a massive interior chamber. It was unlike anything ever seen before. Rows of towering structures, glowing softly, lined the walls like sleeping giants. In the center of the chamber was a single bright sphere of light, shifting, pulsing, alive. The researchers stared in disbelief. Before they could record more, the signal vanished. That was enough to send shockwaves through the Empire's leadership. The Emperor ordered all scientific teams to stop probing the Dreadnought until further notice. He wanted to avoid any unintended consequences. But it was already too late. The galaxy was watching. More and more ships began to gather along the Dreadnought's path. Merchants, explorers, civilians, all curious, all afraid. Everyone wanted to see the ship that defied the Empire. In a small town on one of the outer colonies, a teacher used the event to tell her students about the old Earth. She showed them ancient maps, oceans, forests, mountains. She told them that maybe, just maybe, the people who once called that place home were still out there looking for something that belonged to them. The children listened wide-eyed, imagining a blue planet shining somewhere beyond the stars. Meanwhile, deep inside the Imperial command chamber, tension was rising. The Emperor's advisors urged him to prepare for the worst. One even suggested attacking the Dreadnought before it reached the capital. But the Emperor refused. "You cannot fight something you do not understand," he said. The decision split the military in half. Some saw it as wisdom, others saw it as weakness. The Dreadnought finally entered the sector of the Imperial capital. Thousands gathered to see it pass through the sky. For many, it was the most beautiful and terrifying thing they had ever witnessed. Its massive form covered the sun for a moment, casting a long shadow over the city. The ground shook slightly as it passed overhead, slow and steady, like a mountain drifting through the air. People watched in silence. No one spoke. It was as if the whole galaxy was holding its breath. And then something unexpected happened. For the first time, the Dreadnought emitted a signal that could be heard by everyone. Not just through machines, but through the air, through every communication device, every speaker, every open frequency. It wasn't a message of war. It wasn't a demand. It was a voice. Calm, steady, almost human. "We come not to rule, but to remember." Those words echoed across every world in the Empire. People froze, listening. Some cried, some smiled, others simply stared at the sky. After that, the Dreadnought went silent again. No one knew what it meant. The scientists were lost for words. The Emperor stood at his balcony, watching the ship disappear into the clouds above the capital. For the first time in his life, he felt small, not as a ruler, but as a human being. Something inside him whispered that this was only the beginning, because the Dreadnought had not come for war. It had come for truth, and the Empire, for all its pride and power, wasn't ready for what that truth would reveal. End of Part 2. Approx. 1,500 words, human-centric, simple English, fully YouTube-safe and naturally engaging. For days after the mysterious message was heard across the Empire, "We come not to rule, but to remember," the entire galaxy felt different. People on every world spoke about it. The words were replayed over and over again, echoing through public screens, radio waves, and the quiet corners of space stations. Some people believed the message was a sign of peace, a promise that the strangers meant no harm. Others thought it was a warning, something hidden behind calm words. But one thing was certain: the Dreadnought was real, and its silence carried more power than any weapon the Empire had ever built. Inside the Imperial Palace, confusion had turned into quiet panic. Every scientist, strategist, and historian had been called to study the situation. The Emperor wanted answers, and he wanted them quickly. But answers didn't come easily. The Dreadnought remained motionless above the Imperial capital, floating just beyond the upper atmosphere. It didn't attack, didn't move, didn't send another word. It simply hovered like a giant mirror, reflecting the light of the twin suns. From below, it looked peaceful, almost beautiful. But the people watching knew there was something deeper behind that silence. In the underground research chambers of the Imperial Science Council, a group of analysts had been studying the signals coming from the Dreadnought. They discovered something strange. The ship was not broadcasting a single message, but millions of tiny coded patterns, like whispers layered on top of one another. Each one carried fragments of data, sounds, and symbols. One researcher suggested that it wasn't trying to communicate with the Empire at all, it was trying to wake something up. The Emperor grew impatient. He wanted to know who or what was controlling that ship. If this vessel truly came from Earth, he said to his council, then it means humans existed before our empire. We must know what they became. That statement shook the entire room. For years, the Empire had taught that it was the first and greatest civilization of humankind. If Earth really existed before them, it meant everything they believed about their own history was wrong. In the following days, more information began to surface. Old records were unsealed. Archives long hidden from public eyes were reopened. Among them, scholars found something shocking. An ancient treaty written thousands of years ago between early human colonies and a central government once based on a single planet. The document bore the same symbol that was seen on the Dreadnought's hull. It confirmed what everyone feared. The ship truly was from Earth. But how could something so old still be alive and moving? How could it cross endless light years and reappear now in this exact age, when no one even remembered its origin? That question haunted everyone, from the Emperor's highest advisors to the children who watched the skies at night. In a quiet corner of the Imperial Library, a historian had been working tirelessly to connect the fragments of the past. He studied the markings on the Dreadnought, the coded messages, the rhythm of the signals. Slowly, a pattern began to form. He realized that the message, "We come not to rule but to remember," was only part of something bigger. It was part of a longer transmission, one that had been playing for years, long before the Dreadnought even arrived. That meant the ship had been calling out to the galaxy long before anyone noticed. When the historian brought his discovery to the council, most members were skeptical. But after analyzing the data, the scientists confirmed he was right. The Dreadnought's signal had been echoing quietly through the stars for decades, maybe even centuries, hidden under cosmic noise. The realization hit everyone hard. This wasn't just a visit, it was part of a plan. Soon, the Empire's military began to act differently. They stopped sending fleets near the Dreadnought. Instead, they focused on protecting communication centers and power grids. The Emperor believed the Dreadnought might be studying them, learning how their society worked, watching how they responded. But something else was happening. Across many worlds, strange things began to occur. Machines built on ancient designs started behaving oddly. Old satellites that had been abandoned in orbit for generations suddenly turned on, transmitting the same faint pulse as the Dreadnought. Some even pointed themselves toward it as if answering a call. People grew anxious. Some saw it as a miracle, others as the beginning of something they couldn't control. To calm the population, the imperial government held a galaxy-wide broadcast. The Emperor appeared, standing tall in front of the great symbol of the Empire. His voice was calm and deep as he spoke. "My people," he said, "we are witnessing a moment that will be remembered for generations. We do not yet know the purpose of this ship, but we will face it with courage and wisdom. The Empire will protect its citizens, and no harm shall come to our worlds." The crowd cheered, but deep down many sensed that even the Emperor's confidence was fading. His words were meant to sound strong, but his eyes showed worry. That same night, while the city slept, a strange glow appeared in the sky. The Dreadnought began to release a series of lights from its surface, small orbs that floated downward gently like falling stars. They didn't burn, they didn't crash. They simply drifted, softly landing on the ground in different parts of the planet. Each orb was perfectly round, made of clear glass-like material. They emitted a faint blue light and a low humming sound. Scientists rushed to study them, but no one could open or damage them. Then, as soon as someone touched one, it projected a hologram, a vision of ancient Earth. People saw oceans, mountains, green forests, and blue skies filled with birds. They saw cities that looked different from any they knew, filled with light and life. There were people, humans, smiling, working, building. It was as if the orbs were carrying memories. The visions lasted only a few minutes, but those who witnessed them never forgot. Some cried, saying they had seen something pure and beautiful, something the Empire had lost long ago. After that night, everything changed. Across the Empire, people began to question their history. If Earth had once been real, then why had the Empire hidden it? Why had no one ever been told about humanity's true beginning? The Imperial Council grew nervous. They feared rebellion, not through war, but through truth. The Dreadnought wasn't attacking, it was awakening something far more powerful than any weapon: curiosity. In a secret meeting, the Emperor demanded answers from his advisors. "What does this ship want?" he asked. "Why does it show our people these visions?" The science minister hesitated before answering. "Perhaps it doesn't want anything," he said quietly. "Perhaps it only wants us to remember who we were." Silence filled the room. The Emperor said nothing more. The following days were filled with confusion. People began forming groups calling themselves the Children of Earth. They believed the Dreadnought had come to remind humans of their forgotten home, a place where they once lived in peace before the rise of empires and wars. Even some soldiers started to question their duty. They had always believed the Empire was humanity's greatest achievement, but what if it was actually a shadow of something greater that had been lost? Meanwhile, the Dreadnought remained silent, still floating in the sky, watching, but its presence was no longer terrifying. For many, it had become a symbol of hope. Then one morning, a new message appeared on every communication channel in the galaxy. It wasn't from the Empire, it was from the Dreadnought. The voice was the same calm tone as before, but this time the words were clearer. "We are the memory of Earth. We have crossed time and silence to find what was forgotten. Do not stand in fear. Stand in truth." The message repeated 3 times and then faded. People across the Empire listened in silence. Some fell to their knees, others simply stared at the sky. The Empire's control over the people began to weaken, not because of power, but because of truth. The Emperor, standing by his window, looked up at the giant ship above his world. He felt something he hadn't felt in decades: humility. He understood that no matter how large his empire became, it was still small compared to the legacy that ship carried. The Dreadnought had not come to fight. It had come to teach, and deep inside the Imperial Palace, even the most powerful men and women began to realize that the real fear of the Empire was not the Dreadnought itself. It was what the Dreadnought made people remember. End of Part 3. Approx. 1,500 words, human-centric, simple English, emotionally engaging and fully YouTube-safe. The cold wind swept through the barren plains of the outer world as the giant warship known as the Dreadnought hovered silently in orbit. Its metallic hull shimmered like dark glass, absorbing the faint light from the dying sun below. Inside, tension filled every corridor. Officers hurried about, their faces pale, their eyes wide with both awe and fear. The once invincible empire had finally met something it could not fully understand: an unknown Earth that refused to kneel. Days had passed since the Dreadnought's first encounter with the humans from that strange planet. They were supposed to be primitive, without advanced technology or interstellar weapons, but what the Empire saw shattered every belief they had. Earth had changed, evolved quietly, away from the watchful eyes of the Empire. And now that ignorance had become the Empire's greatest mistake. Inside the command chamber, the ship's admiral stood before the viewing screen, watching the silent blue planet that glowed beneath the Dreadnought. His voice was low, filled with disbelief. "How could this be?" he muttered. Reports from the ground teams had shown destroyed Imperial mechs, shattered armor, and entire fleets crippled by weapons the Empire had never seen before. One of the younger officers stepped forward hesitantly. "Sir, the latest scans indicate energy readings from the planet's surface. It's not like anything in our database. The composition is unstable but controlled." The Admiral turned sharply. "Unstable energy that can destroy battleships? That's not primitive science." He frowned, his thoughts running fast. "It means they've learned something we haven't. Something we feared." Far below, on Earth's surface, a storm was brewing, not in the sky, but in the hearts of its people. The human resistance had grown from scattered survivors into a united force. What began as fear had transformed into determination. They had no choice but to fight. Their homes had been burned, their cities scarred, but their spirit refused to die. In an underground base deep within the mountain ranges, the core group of humans worked day and night. Their technology wasn't made from alien resources. It was forged from human ingenuity, desperation, and unity. Machines powered by hybrid energy hummed around them. Engineers, scientists, and pilots worked shoulder to shoulder, each driven by the same thought: survival. One of the senior engineers leaned over the control board, checking the latest readings from the captured Imperial device. "They call this technology void energy," he said, his hands trembling slightly. "But they never realized Earth already had something far stronger. We've learned to bend light, gravity, and even sound. The Empire underestimated us." Another replied softly, "They've ruled the galaxy for centuries, but they forgot that fear makes people smarter, stronger." Above them, the Dreadnought continued its silent observation. The Empire had always conquered through fear and domination, but this time fear had turned against them. The Admiral stood still, remembering the countless planets they had subdued. No resistance had ever lasted this long. Yet this small, forgotten world had forced their greatest warship into hesitation. In the darkness of space, the Dreadnought's sensors flickered again. Strange readings appeared, and one officer gasped. "Admiral, new contacts detected. Multiple signatures emerging from Earth's orbit. Unknown crafts moving fast." The Admiral's eyes narrowed. "Put them on screen." The image shifted, revealing a fleet of human-built ships rising from the planet's shadow. They were rough, made from scrap and salvaged Imperial wreckage, but their formation was tight, their intent clear. They were not running. They were coming straight for the Dreadnought. The Admiral clenched his fists. They dare challenge us with those toys? Yet deep inside he felt unease. He had seen those same toys tear apart smaller cruisers days ago. The humans fought differently, not with protocol but with emotion. Every maneuver carried heart and desperation, and that made them unpredictable. "Prepare the plasma cannons," he ordered. No mercy. The Dreadnought's hull came alive, glowing with light. From space it looked like a slumbering beast awakening. The first volley of plasma bolts cut through the void, illuminating the battlefield. But the human ships didn't scatter. Instead, they weaved through the fire, moving as if they already knew where the blasts would hit. Then something unexpected happened. One of the human ships released a burst of energy that disrupted the Dreadnought's targeting systems. Screens flickered. Control panels went dead. The Admiral's calm voice turned sharp. "What just happened?" "Unknown interference, sir." "It's like they're jamming our systems from the inside." From the surface, a coded message was being transmitted through frequencies no Imperial system could block. The humans had hijacked one of the Dreadnought's old encryption codes, proof that they had learned far more than anyone expected. Inside the ship, chaos grew. Lights dimmed, alarms wailed, and the Admiral's crew rushed to restore control. "They've infected our network," one shouted. "They're using our own systems against us." Meanwhile, on Earth, the Resistance leader looked up at the holographic feed, showing the Dreadnought's orbit beginning to waver. "This is it," he said quietly. "The moment the Empire learns to fear." The plan wasn't to destroy the Dreadnought outright, it was to send a message. For centuries, the Empire had believed it was invincible. But now, in a single battle, humans had shown them something more powerful than technology: unity, courage, and willpower. The Admiral finally ordered a retreat. His pride screamed against it, but he couldn't risk losing the Dreadnought. "Pull back to the far orbit," he commanded. We regroup, then we strike again. As the massive warship began to drift away, the humans didn't chase. They simply held their position, watching as the Empire's greatest weapon slowly vanished into the dark. The people on Earth erupted in cheers, some crying, some laughing. They had survived the impossible. Yet deep within the Dreadnought, the Admiral stared at the fading image of the blue planet. "This isn't over," he whispered. "If they can do this with scraps and courage, what will happen when they grow stronger?" In that moment, he realized the Empire's true fear. It wasn't losing a battle. It was facing a world that refused to bow. A world that could learn, adapt, and rise. The Dreadnought's engines burned bright as it disappeared into the horizon of stars. On Earth, the Resistance knew the fight wasn't finished, but for the first time they believed they could win. And as the night sky glowed with falling debris from the battle above, the people whispered a single thought that echoed across the planet. The Empire's worst fear has finally come true. They were no longer the hunted. They were the beginning of something far greater, a force that would one day shake the entire galaxy. Would you like me to continue the same emotional cinematic tone for Part 5 too? The night after the great battle was strangely silent. The sky above Earth still shimmered faintly with the remnants of fire from the orbiting war, tiny streaks of light falling like glowing rain. People gathered outside their shelters and homes, looking up in wonder. For the first time in history, they had faced the mighty Empire, and the Empire had stepped back. But no one celebrated for long. Deep down, they knew this was not the end. The Empire never accepted defeat. It only retreated to return stronger. The Resistance leaders understood that clearly. Every person on Earth knew that the Dreadnought, the Empire's most feared warship, was still out there, somewhere beyond the horizon of stars, planning its next move. Inside the mountain base, the atmosphere was heavy but determined. Engineers worked non-stop, fixing damaged machines and collecting data from the recent fight. The underground halls were filled with the buzz of tools and the hum of power generators. People were exhausted, but they didn't stop. They couldn't afford to. Every minute mattered now. In a quiet corner of the control room, two young technicians examined the holographic projection of the Dreadnought's last known trajectory. It didn't jump far, one said, tracing the glowing line. They're probably hiding behind one of the moons to repair and plan. The commander of the base stood behind them, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the display. His voice was calm, but his tone carried weight. They're watching us, he said. They're studying how we fight. Next time they won't make the same mistakes. That thought lingered in everyone's minds. The Empire's strength had always come from learning fast and striking harder. If they were given time, they would adapt. They would come back with new weapons, new tactics, and no mercy. Meanwhile, on the far side of Earth's orbit, the Dreadnought floated silently in the void. Its outer hull bore scars from the battle, burned metal, cracked plating, and missing panels. Inside, the mood was grim. The crew avoided speaking too loudly. Everyone knew the Admiral's temper, and after a defeat, silence was safer than excuses. In the command chamber, the Admiral stood before a massive star map, surrounded by his senior officers. His expression was cold, his jaw tight. "Our fleet has never been humiliated like this," he said quietly, "by a single planet that wasn't even supposed to have spaceflight technology." One of the officers stepped forward nervously. "Sir, the damage reports indicate multiple system breaches caused by Earth's energy interference. We've never seen that kind of hybrid tech before. It combines our own energy patterns with something entirely new." The Admiral's eyes narrowed. "You mean they learned from us in days?" "Yes, sir," the officer replied. "They used our wrecked drones, decoded fragments of our tech, and built their countermeasures faster than expected. They learn like we do." That word, learn, stuck in the Admiral's head. The Empire had always ruled through superiority, through the belief that no other world could match their intellect or innovation. But these humans had broken that illusion. They weren't just brave, they were clever, and that made them dangerous. He turned back to the star map and gave a cold smile. "Then we'll change our plan. We don't crush them from orbit anymore. We break them from within. Find their signal sources, locate their main base. This time we'll tear them apart before they can breathe." His command spread through the ship like a shadow. Within hours, probes were launched, scanning every inch of Earth's surface. Back on Earth, strange things began to happen. Communication systems started to flicker. Some drones malfunctioned. Even the power in the mountain base began to fluctuate. At first, people thought it was technical failure, but the engineers quickly realized the truth. The Dreadnought had found a way to infiltrate their systems again. "We're being scanned," one of the engineers said, panic in his voice. "They're tracing our energy signatures. If we stay in one place too long, they'll pinpoint us." The commander gave a short nod. "Then we move. Begin evacuation protocol." The underground base came alive in a rush. People packed data cores, dismantled equipment, and prepared vehicles. Children and civilians were moved through hidden tunnels, guided by soldiers with tired but determined faces. Outside, the mountains were covered in mist, hiding the movement of trucks and hovercrafts as they made their escape. But the Empire's reach was fast. Within minutes, the sky turned bright. The Dreadnought had reappeared, its silhouette dark against the clouds. From its belly, waves of energy beams began to fall, striking the valleys below. The ground trembled. Trees burst into flames. The humans ran for cover as explosions echoed across the horizon. Yet even in chaos, the resistance refused to surrender. Mobile defense units rolled out from hidden bunkers. They launched counterfire, small, precise energy pulses that disrupted the Dreadnought's attack grid. From one of the ridges, a human pilot launched a prototype aircraft straight into the sky. It wasn't big, but it was fast. its wings made of reflective material that confused the enemy's scanners. He flew close to the Dreadnought, weaving through bursts of plasma fire. The ship's sensors struggled to keep up. Then, with a deep breath, he activated the experimental energy charge. A sphere of blinding light detached from his craft and latched onto the Dreadnought's hull. Seconds later, it exploded, not with fire but with a silent wave of distortion that shut down part of the Dreadnought's control systems. Inside the ship, alarms blared again. Officers rushed to contain the system crash. The Admiral gritted his teeth. "They've done it again," he muttered. "They're turning our own power against us." But unlike before, he wasn't planning to retreat. He ordered his ground troops to deploy. Dozens of drop pods rained down toward Earth, each carrying squads of armored soldiers. The humans below braced themselves as the pods crashed into the Earth, scattering dust and fire. The battle that followed was fierce but different. It wasn't just about weapons anymore. It was about survival, about proving who deserved to stand. Both sides fought with everything they had. The Empire's soldiers, disciplined and relentless, advanced steadily. The humans, agile and unpredictable, struck from the shadows using their terrain and instincts. Hours passed like minutes. Smoke filled the air, the sound of metal clashing echoing through the hills. Amid the chaos, the commander of the Resistance spotted something strange through the smoke. A signal pulsing from one of the Empire's communication units. He realized it was transmitting back to the Dreadnought. Without hesitation, he gave the order, "Cut their link. If we sever that signal, the Dreadnought can't coordinate their attack." A team of technicians and soldiers rushed toward the device, dodging fire. When they reached it, they manually overloaded the transmitter with raw energy. The device sparked violently, then exploded, sending a surge back through the Empire's network. On the Dreadnought, control screens flickered again. The Admiral's expression turned dark as systems began to fail for the third time. "Enough," he growled. "Pull the troops back. This world is a curse." As the Empire's soldiers withdrew, the humans stood among the ruins, exhausted but alive. The battle had left scars both on the land and on their hearts, but they had won another day. Night fell once more, and the fires in the distance slowly faded. The commander looked at the sky where the Dreadnought was barely visible among the stars. He knew it would return, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but it would come again. And when it did, Earth would be ready. Because now, the humans understood something powerful. The Empire feared not their weapons, but their spirit. The more the Empire tried to crush them, the more united they became. In the silence of that long night, with the stars shining above and the ruins glowing faintly below, humanity stood stronger than ever. They had faced the might of an empire, and they had not fallen. And somewhere in the depths of space, aboard the battered Dreadnought, the Admiral looked into the endless dark and whispered the truth his pride couldn't deny. They are no longer prey. They are becoming the hunters. Far beyond the blue glow of Earth, the Dreadnought drifted through the dark emptiness of space. Its once proud hull now bore the marks of defeat, burnt edges, broken armor plates, and long scars that told the story of a war it had never expected to lose. Inside, the air was cold and heavy. The crew moved quietly, afraid to speak too loudly, afraid to look their admiral in the eye. For the first time in decades, the Empire's greatest ship had been forced to retreat. To those who lived under the Empire's rule, this news was impossible to believe. The Dreadnought had crushed worlds, silenced rebellions, and ended civilizations. Yet now it was damaged by a single planet that wasn't even part of the galactic map until recently. In the command chamber, the Admiral stood still, staring at the holographic projection of Earth. Its soft blue light reflected in his eyes like a haunting memory. Around him, the officers waited for orders, unsure if he would demand another attack or finally admit that this war had gone too far. He finally broke the silence. "Send word to the Emperor," he said. "Tell him Earth is not a simple world. Tell him it's something else." The officer hesitated. "Sir, are we calling for reinforcements?" The Admiral's jaw tightened. "No, we're not ready for another fight. We don't understand them yet." There was something different about this battle. The Empire had always won through strength, but Earth had fought through willpower, through unity. The Admiral couldn't understand it, how ordinary people, with limited technology and broken weapons, could stand against the most powerful army in the galaxy and live to tell the tale. Meanwhile, back on Earth, life was slowly returning to a fragile normal. The resistance camps were being rebuilt. The skies were clearing, and people were beginning to step out of hiding. The world still bore the scars of war, but for the first time in generations, there was hope in the air. In a rebuilt control bunker, the leaders of the human resistance gathered around a cracked table, illuminated by the glow of old monitors. The commander spoke in a low but steady voice. "We've survived their attacks, but survival isn't enough. We can't keep waiting for them to strike again. We have to take the fight to them." Everyone in the room went quiet. The idea of leaving Earth seemed impossible. Their ships were small, their resources limited, but they all knew that if the Empire returned with a full fleet, there would be no second chance. One of the scientists leaned forward, showing the readings they had collected from the Dreadnought's wreckage. "Their technology is damaged, but not beyond repair. If we can study their engines, we can build a ship powerful enough to leave the solar system. Maybe not to conquer, but to protect." The commander nodded slowly. "Then we start building, quietly, secretly. We'll give them a reason to think twice before coming back." Days turned into weeks. Across the planet, humans worked together like never before. Engineers, mechanics, and scientists united, repurposing old war machines and fragments of alien tech. Underground hangars filled with sparks, welding lights, and the steady hum of creation. Out of broken metal and determination, something extraordinary was taking shape. A vessel built not for conquest but for defense. Above them, the stars watched silently. Somewhere in that darkness, the Dreadnought still waited. Its sensors occasionally flickered, recording Earth's progress from afar. The Admiral had chosen not to attack again. Not yet. Instead, he studied them. Every new signal, every strange energy pulse, every movement from the planet's surface. The more he learned, the more uneasy he became. "They're growing," he said to his officers one evening. "They're learning faster than any species we've ever encountered. If we don't act soon, the balance of power will shift." But one of his officers, older and wiser, replied quietly, "Perhaps it already has, sir. Maybe this is not about power anymore. Maybe it's about fear, ours." The Admiral didn't answer. For a long moment, he simply stared at the holographic projection of the Earth again, its oceans glowing faintly against the dark. He thought of the men and women who had fought back, who had refused to bow. In his heart, something stirred, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Respect. On Earth, construction continued day and night. The humans named their new ship simply Guardian. It wasn't as large as the Dreadnought, but its design was unique. It was powered by the same hybrid energy that had once crippled the Empire's systems. It was built to move silently, to shield itself from scanners, and to strike only when needed. The day of launch finally came. Across the world, people gathered to watch. The mountains trembled as engines roared, clouds split apart, and the Guardian rose into the sky like a beacon of hope. For humanity, it was not just a ship, it was a symbol, a promise that they would never again be helpless. From the Dreadnought, far in orbit, the Admiral watched the launch through his ship's long-range sensors. His crew stood silently behind him, unsure of what he would do. But instead of attacking, he gave a surprising order. "Stand down," he said. "Do not interfere." His officers exchanged confused looks. One of them finally asked, "Sir, why let them rise? They could become a threat." The Admiral looked out at the glowing blue planet. "They already are," he said softly. "But destroying them won't save the Empire. Understanding them might." For the first time in the Empire's long history, its most feared weapon, the Dreadnought, turned away from a battlefield without a fight. It drifted deeper into space, carrying its wounded pride and unanswered questions. On Earth, the Guardian broke through the atmosphere, entering the darkness of space for the first time. Its sensors came alive, scanning the stars, mapping the unknown. The crew aboard watched in awe as the planet shrank beneath them. They were not fleeing. They were expanding. They were reaching out, determined to see what else was out there and to make sure no empire, no matter how powerful, would ever threaten their home again. Weeks later, the Guardian's crew picked up a faint transmission. It wasn't a threat nor a call for surrender. It was a simple message encrypted in the Empire's language. The commander played it aloud, and the voice that echoed through the ship was calm, familiar. It was the Admiral's. He said only a few words. You have awakened something greater than fear. Be ready, humans. The galaxy is watching. The message ended, leaving a heavy silence in the command deck. The crew exchanged uncertain looks, unsure if it was a warning or a strange kind of respect. The commander simply smiled faintly and replied, "Let them watch. We're not afraid anymore." And with that, the Guardian continued its journey into the stars. Back on Earth, people stood beneath the night sky, watching a tiny bright light moving among the constellations. It was their ship, their creation, their proof that no empire could ever break the will of a united world. The Dreadnought and the Guardian, two symbols born from opposite sides of the same war, now shared the same sky. One carried the weight of centuries of domination. The other carried the hope of a new beginning. And somewhere in that vast silence between stars, a new story was beginning, one where humanity was no longer the hunted, but the equal. The Empire's worst fear had come true. An unknown Earth had risen, and the Dreadnought, once the terror of the galaxy, now drifted in awe, knowing that the universe would never be the same again.